Welcome to A Shock in the Dark. I'm the narrator tonight, coming to you from a town named after somebody who's been to your house. And they love you so much they give you things. Of course, I'm talking about Santa Claus. I am not going to be staying in Santa Claus tonight because there's nowhere to stay. But that's where I am right now. Every episode of Season 5 of the show, I'm driving all over the United States, traveling to where your letters take me and getting as close as I'm able to the actual locations mentioned in each story. That's why right now I'm in what seems like, I don't know, a ghost town? It's not even a ghost town. It is, however, the origin of tonight's letter. Hello, A Shock in the Dark. I had to tell you my story. You're welcome to use it for your show, but it's not a problem at all if you can't. I changed the names and screen names because that's what everybody does. Anyway, here's my story. My dad had a regular corporate job ever since I was born, until around 20 years ago. After taking a course in real estate, he put his 2-week notice in at work, cleaned out his retirement account, and started buying up land. Turns out he's got a knack for it. Buying and selling land has made him a fairly well-off guy. So a couple of years ago, I was in my room playing this military game that was popular at the time, and I was online with a couple of buddies. These were people I had never met in real life before. I knew one of them only by their name Skunky, and the other one Elmo. Other than that, I really didn't know much about these guys, but I played with them all the time. My dad popped into my room, which is at our house in Yucca, Arizona, and said, "Pack up the gear, we're heading out in the morning." I got excited because I love road trips with my dad. "Where are we going, Dad?" "Nowhere. I mean, we're going to a spot in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert. I just bought 100 acres, and we're going to go see it. Don't need the tents, just bring the rest of the gear. There's structures on the property, and we can sleep there." So, I packed up all of what we call our adventure gear, sleeping bag, some canned beans, my drone for taking some cool pictures, and yeah, I also packed the tents because you never know. And the next morning, we headed out. On the way out of town, I saw a used bookstore, and I asked my dad to pull over and let me pick up something to read while we're camping out, because I figure, reading a book under the stars, that sounds nice. He said okay, but to hurry, so I wasn't that particular when I grabbed the book I got. I saw the book, Don Quixote, which I know the basic story, but I never read the book, and the book wasn't in great condition, but it was cheap, so that's what I got. For the rest of the car ride down, it was just me and my dad hanging out and talking, and I learned that Dad had bought this land sight unseen. The land came with 3 structures on it, and he proudly mentioned, more than once, that he got it for a bargain. I remember he said something like, "They practically paid me to take it." Well, eventually we arrived, and Dad was upbeat, but I just couldn't see any value in that property. I learned an important lesson that day, and I'll share it with you for free. Here it goes. Just because something is cheap doesn't mean it's a bargain. The land that my dad had bought, I really don't know how much you could do with land like that. It's not like rich soil or something. You're not going to plant corn there. And the structures, you could barely call them that. It was really more like somebody tried to build something, somebody who was not blessed with the talent of carpentry, and they must have quit halfway through. And even that has now collapsed and is being reclaimed by nature. It's a good thing I didn't obey my dad and I brought the tents. That's all I'm saying. Dad gave me the option of driving over to Kingman, Arizona and staying in a hotel for the night since that was just down the street, but I liked the idea of building a fire and just kicking back under the stars and reading that book like I had planned. Now, this land is right near Highway 93, which is a 4-lane highway. As it got darker, traffic just started dwindling down until finally it was mostly just an occasional tractor trailer. Dad had fallen asleep, and I had just opened my book in hopes of reading under the stars, which sounded so cool, but even being near the fire, it was too dim to read. I did, however, notice when I opened up the book, the previous owner of the book had done a lot of underlining and highlighting and had done all these little drawings in the margins of the book. Now, here's where it starts getting weird. And yeah, all of this could be a coincidence. And when I tell people about it, it never fails that they're extremely unimpressed. But call it a coincidence, call it a glitch in the matrix, but this series of events that followed is nothing less than miraculous to me. So I open up the book, I'm looking at these drawings, and I look at this drawing of a cactus in the margin of the book when I hear the sound of an engine in trouble, and then this long hiss sound. So I look up from the cactus drawing in the book, and the first thing I see is a cactus. A cactus that looked very much like the drawing in the book. Now, there's not a lot of cactuses around this land, so that was odd, but I wouldn't have even given that a second thought if it wasn't for what happened next. So I look up the book, see the cactus, then I saw the car. It was an old El Camino rolling to a stop on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. I'm not a good judge of distance, but let's just say it's like 20 yards from where we set up camp, like dead straight ahead from our camp. I could see two people get out of the car. The driver opened the hood, and all this smoke or steam bellowed out. I could hear them talking, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. By this time, my dad was awake from hearing all the activity, and without speaking, we both just slipped on our shoes and started walking over to the car to see if we could help. As we approached the car, my dad shouted out a friendly-sounding, "Hello there! Need any help?" I guess so they wouldn't freak out that two people were walking up to him, stranded on the highway in the middle of nowhere. We ended up chatting for quite a while. The driver, this older guy, maybe around 50, named Jerry, and his son, 20, named Chase, had been traveling from Phoenix, where they bought this El Camino, and they were going back to Salt Lake City, where they lived. Like a father-son bonding experience. They explained that the car was running hot because of a radiator issue. They had a way to, quote, put a Band-Aid on it to make it back home, but they had to wait for everything to cool off, so we invited them to come back to our camp and hang out and relax for a while. My dad suggested that I show Chase my drone, which was a great idea. At least it gave me and this other kid something to talk about. So we walk over to our camp, and I'm about to get my drone out of its case when the man notices my Don Quixote book. He says, "Oh, is that your book? I used to have that exact book. Have you ever read it?" I start to answer him, but the man tilted his head so that he's looking at the book straight up and down, and he says, I'm sorry, can I? Sure, yeah, go ahead. He picks up the book, and he starts to leaf through it, and his mouth is hanging open, and he flips to the front page, and just freaks out. He all but collapses right there on the spot. He literally dropped to his knees and stuck out his right hand to steady himself on the log that I'd been using as a chair. The kid says, "Dad!" All of us are freaking out because we have no idea what's happening. I'm thinking this guy's having a heart attack, but the guy just looks up with tears in his eyes. And he says, "This is my book. This is my book." Then he changed from being all crying and stuff to being manic. He's like, look, see these drawings? These are mine. Look, my name. He holds the book up so everybody can see the first page of the book, and there it is. Property of Gerald R. Kane, 1987. I picked it up on the way down here at a bookstore in Yucca. The man apologized for his dramatic reaction, but at the same time, he explained his emotional attachment to the book. He had been given this book as a gift from his grandparents when he was a teenager. He had used it to write a book report, but then ended up really loving the book and reading it many, many times. And each time he would read the book, he would draw these little pieces of scenes he would see in his head as he read. It really cemented this book in his imagination. He ended up leaving this book at his grandparents' house the last time he ever saw them. They had died when their house burned down 20 years ago. Jerry said he knew that some things had survived the fire, but most of that stuff was given to charity. His father had salvaged some stuff that were sentimental for the family, but he figured this book was lost forever. He said it was just such a shock. He thought for sure that book was gone forever, but then to randomly come across it like this in the middle of nowhere where the car broke down, it was just all too much to be a coincidence. I don't know what I think about it, and I don't really agree with his interpretation of it, but the man definitely took it as a sign his grandparents were watching over him. I didn't argue with him about that. I let him have that. I also let him have the book, of course. I mean, the man offered me $100 for it, and I told him, of course, I could not take that from him. "It's yours," I said. The man, Jerry, excused himself and took a walk up to the car, supposedly to check on the car, but I think he was either praying or just pondering how crazy everything was. To keep his son, Chase, from feeling awkward, I cheerily and casually said, "So you want to come check out that drone?" I took the drone out for a spin. I let him control it for a bit, under my watchful eye in case he made any sudden moves that would crash it into the highway. But, he was a natural. He was good at it. And this led us to talking about video games. Turns out he played a lot of games, some of the same games that I loved. He had just been playing that same military game the night before. Are you with me? Do you understand what is happening here? Yeah, this guy, Chase, his screen name in the military game is Skunky. I know this guy. I've spent hours with this guy, virtually. And even though I didn't really know anything about him, I knew him. I knew what kind of guy he was. I knew he was a cool guy, a nice guy, a good person. But for the second time that night, a strange, 1 in a million coincidence had taken place. It would be like flipping a quarter and having it land standing straight up on its rim twice in a row. As I said, I don't know if this is just a 1 in 10 billion chance or simple coincidence or glitch in the matrix or something paranormal, but at the very least, this is the most unusual set of circumstances I have ever encountered. And like I said, when I tell people this story, they don't seem to get impressed with it. Definitely not as impressed as I think they should be. I mean, I'm blown away by this. I hope you find it interesting enough to put on your show. I'm curious to see if anybody else out there has experienced any kind of coincidence like this. Anything this odd. Keep the stories coming. I always listen when I'm on a road trip that make the time fly by. Sincerely, Billy. By the way, I wrote back to Billy to ask him a follow-up question, and here's his response. "Hey, Shock, I can't believe you wrote back. Yeah, we all ended up exchanging numbers. Jerry sent me a brand new copy of Don Quixote, and Chase and I have become good friends. We don't see each other that much, maybe every few months or something, but we text a lot, and we're always playing against each other or on teams together with these games. So yeah, I guess you could truthfully say that Jerry got a valuable book, and I got a good friend, and they really were gifts from Santa Claus." I like that. And that's the story for tonight. All true stories of the strange and unexplained. And once and for all, proving Santa Claus is real and when you least expect it, can give you the most meaningful gifts of all. As the Shock in the Dark tour of the United States continues, and your letters dictate my journey across the U.S., next week maybe I'll be where you are. to support this channel and maybe give me a little bit of gas money, possibly some food, please do one of the following, or even all of them. Subscribe, make a comment, give the video a thumbs up, send me your story about your paranormal or unexplained event, share this channel with a friend. It doesn't have to be in the U.S. Your story doesn't have to be in the U.S., by the way. I would love to do a road trip of the U.K. for sure. But in the meantime, this is the narrator bidding you good night, wherever and whoever you are. And thank you.